Welcome to the JP8 Report. This is James Pierce with the JP8 Report, episode number 42, My Independence Day Message. And before we get started, thank you for tuning in to this episode. And I remind you, if you have not done so, to go ahead and subscribe to the JP8 Report, whether it be on Rumble or Podbean or YouTube. Give us a chance and get notified every time I publish, and share it to your friends. Okay, so here we go. Breaking news out of Philadelphia. This is July 4th, 1776. We have just been delivered a document from the Continental Congress, and it states, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and assertions pursuing inevitable the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security, such as been the patient sovereigns of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right invincible to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the repository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, in the states remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage the migration hither, and raising the conditions of the new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their subsistence. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to the jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in the colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures, for declaring themselves invested in the power of the legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy sacredly paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive by the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, and to fall themselves by their hands. he has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages who, known by rule of warfare, is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have only been answered by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act by which may define a tyrant is unfit to be ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend unwarrantable jurisdictions over us. We have reminded them of all circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred and disavowed these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, due in name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly and publish and declare that these united colonies are and of the right ought to be free and independent states that are resolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do the other acts and things which independent states may have right do. And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance to the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The foregoing declaration was, by the order of Congress, engrossed and signed by the following members: John Hancock. From New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. From Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean. Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Payne, Elbridge Gerry. From Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll. From Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins and William Ellery. From Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott. From Virginia, George Wythe, Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton. From New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. From North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. From New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. From South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. From Georgia, George Walton, Lyman Hall, and Button Winnett. And then from Pennsylvania, you have Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and then George Ross. That is the Declaration of Independence. That was published, it was signed on July 2nd, 1776, and it was published on July 4th, 1776. And just so you know, James Madison, James Monroe, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams all died on July 4th. They were of 1826 and 1831, and they were all former presidents of the United States. There was the Independence Day didn't become widely celebrated until the 1870s when it became a federal holiday. If you did notice when I was reading the names of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence, notice that Delaware only had 3 delegates compared to Pennsylvania. Just prior to the Declaration of Independence, Delaware separated off and became a separate colony from Pennsylvania. Okay, so they were the youngest of all the colonies when they separated. And as you know, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. And then most of the men died being poor, but they knew what to expect from everything that happened. If you read this on your own, besides just listening to me recite it, a lot of that pertains to today. So we need to watch ourselves and enforce and tell our representatives where they're failing us, and so we can correct it. And 246 years ago, 245 years ago, 245 years ago, we signed the Declaration of Independence to separate from a tyrannous monarchy and became a separate country. Today we make those changes at the ballot box. And it is your responsibility to enforce those changes so that tyranny does not take over, that we all live free. Doesn't matter if you're white, black, red, yellow, blue, green, purple. It doesn't matter. We're all Americans. Okay? And like it says back over here, I'll read it, that all men are created, all men, all, not some, not few, not whole bunches, but all men are created equal, and they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. Just remember that on this Independence Day, 245th anniversary of what we have, that's a precious country that we have, that God gave us. This is James Pierce with the JP8 Report. I'll see you on the flip side. I'm out.